The first piece of the evidence is what I pulled out from FRED, okay, Federal Reserve Economic Database. And you see three variables which we put on the figure. The blue curve shows nominal GDP, okay? The red one is the velocity of M2, okay, at the bottom of the figure. The green one is M2, the money supply, okay, the measure of the money supply. And we showed you from 1980 all the way to 2020, okay, in other words, in the past 4 decades. And to better show you the overtime evolution, we took the beginning year 1980 as 100, okay, as a benchmark. And so what you see here on the graph would be, the change, overtime change compared to 1980, okay? For example, if you look at the blue curve GDP here, okay, and you find that right before the pandemic, this number is approximately 700. It's above 700. That means in 2019, the nominal GDP in that year is 7 times higher than that in 1980. All right. And so here, what we can find is before 2010, okay, before the most recent financial crisis of 2007-2008, you find that the blue curve and the green one are pretty close, okay? Like they move towards the same direction, hand by hand. There's a pretty strong positive correlation between these two, okay? And at the bottom, you find that the red curve, which is a velocity, is quite stable over time, okay, over these decades. So it looks like it's pretty much in favor of the quantity equation of money, especially the assumption that the velocity of money is constant, right? Also, the nominal GDP here, the blue curve, is P times Y, right? And the green curve is M, the money supply, okay? So it looks like that P times Y is approximately equal to M times V, okay? That's why, for a given constant V, these two, M and nominal GDP are, positively correlated, okay? But what's also interesting is you're going to find that after 2010, because of the Federal Reserve's quantitative easing policies, we find that M2 getting further and further away from nominal GDP. In other words, the money supply grew much faster than the economy, okay? The output, the nominal value of the output. All right? Does that mean the quantity equation of money did not hold anymore during the post-Great Recession? But if you take a closer look at the chart, especially the velocity of money, you would also find that the velocity declines a little bit, okay? So we're still not sure if, the velocity times money supply would still be approximately equal to nominal GDP, okay? I'm going to leave this for you guys to check out pull out the FRED chart, and you can pick several moments in different years in history and do some simple calculation, and then during our virtual meeting we can talk about this, okay? Is this quantity equation of money still held after the Great Recession? All right, so this is the first thing. The second thing I want you guys to think about is here it looks like, over the whole sample period, the velocity of money is much more stable than the other two variables. So it gives us an impression that it's pretty safe to assume that the velocity of money is constant. However, you got to remember this red line, it looks pretty stable because compared to nominal GDP and the money supply, the velocity changed very little, okay? But it doesn't mean, it's very much constant, right? Or stable. There might be some fluctuations, but we just cannot see it when we put it on the same graph, same figure with nominal GDP and money supply. Okay, because the other two variables changed too much. Okay, like as we said, nominal GDP like 7 times, right? When you look at the money supply, 12 times as much as back in 1980, right? But we should not expect that the velocity of money would change 7 times or 12 times over these years. Okay, so this is another thing we're gonna check out later. Okay, and here I just want to, because we're talking about this chart, I want you guys to, have some time to think about this. Okay, all right, so don't forget about this. Go to Fred and pull out this chart and do some math. Okay, and I'm gonna ask you to share your results during our meeting. All right, the second piece of the evidence shows the cross-country evidence. Okay, and each green dot on the figure represents one country. Okay, so here, for example, you see the United States. The growth in money supply is approximately 5%. Okay, this is the annual growth rate. Okay, and the annual inflation rate in the U.S. is approximately 2%. All right, so every year the money supply in the U.S. grows about 5%. We get 5% more money circulating in our economy, which eventually leads to approximately 2% increase in overall price level. Okay. Now here, if you look at the whole sample, you should be able to find there's a pretty obvious positive correlation across countries. Okay? And this means the faster the money supply grows in that country, the higher the inflation it experiences. Okay, so for example, if we look at the Democratic Republic of Congo, okay, it has the money supply growth rate approximately 30% per year, okay, which led to approximately 15% inflation rate every year. All right, so once again, this piece of evidence is pretty much in favor of the quantity equation of money, okay? Especially about that percentage change equation, okay? Because as we said, there's a one-for-one relationship, okay? The more money the monetary authority pumps into the economy, the higher the inflation would be, okay? And the third piece of the evidence, let's switch our attention back to the US, okay? Looking at two variables, M2 growth rate and inflation rate. Once again, here we focus upon the percentage change equation, okay? And we look at from 1960 all the way to 2014, 2015, okay? Now, based upon the quantity equation of money, we would expect these two variables are positively correlated. Remember, we said if the velocity is a constant, so there's no growth rate in velocity. And the growth rate of the real GDP over a long period of time is also constant, right? Approximately 3 to 3.5%. So what's left over would be, on the left-hand side, it's an inflation rate, which is a percentage change in overall price level. On the right-hand side, it's the percentage change in money supply, which is approximated with the M2 growth rate here. Okay. Now, will you able to find the positive correlation between these two? It doesn't look like that, right? It doesn't look like there's a positive correlation. So is this evidence against the quantity equation of money? Hold on one second. Here, what we saw is just, the high frequency data. In other words, when we look at the inflation rate and M2 growth rate, I believe this is a monthly data, okay? However, we believe that in the short run, there might be a lot of, noises or ups and downs, okay? If we would like to find a long-term relationship, we'd better look at this. See, here, if we draw the moving average of these two, okay, you find that the green curve shows the M2 growth rate, the red curve is the average inflation rate. These two are positively correlated. Okay, when one goes up, the other goes up as well, right? So we believe this is still in favor of the quantity equation of money. Okay, now why? Let me briefly explain why in the short run these two could be different. Okay, this is because on the money market, the Federal Reserve, which is the central bank of the U.S., conducted what's so-called the counter-cyclical monetary policies. In other words, for example, in early 1970s, when our inflation rate shoots up, in other words, we experience a relatively high inflation, the Fed actually reduced the money supply substantially, okay, or at least slow down of the money supply, the growth of money supply, so that it can fight against the inflation. Okay, and so when the inflation decreased in mid and late 1970s, we find that the Fed picks up the relatively higher growth rate of money supply. Okay, so it's always against these business cycles. That's why in the short run, it's very hard for us to figure out, the relationship between these two. Okay, especially a positive